Welcome to the second part on Unit 4, sorting materials into groups. In the first part, we have gone through the properties of materials. In the second part, we would study each of these properties in detail. First property is appearance. So materials look different from each other. Wood looks different from iron, and iron appears to be different from copper or aluminium. At the same time, there may be some similarities between iron, copper and aluminium that are not present in wood. Materials can be grouped on the basis of luster and dullness that is possessed by them. Lustrous materials are shiny, while non-lustrous materials are dull. Example like gold, silver, iron, etc. They are the lustrous materials. They are having the shine on them. While non-lustrous materials, they appear dull. They are not having any shine. Example wood, plastic, etc. Materials that have luster are usually metals. Iron, copper, aluminium and gold are example of metals. Some metals often lose their shine and appear dull because of the action of air and moisture on them. We therefore notice the luster only when they are freshly cut. When you visit an ironsmith or a workshop, you look at the freshly cut surface of metal rods to see if they have luster. Definitely they would be having shiny surface. Second property is hardness. So some materials, when you press with your hand, they can be easily compressible. So some are not compressible. So materials which can be easily compressed, they are called soft materials like cotton. And some materials that are difficult to compress, they are called hard materials. Example iron. Third property is soluble or insoluble. Materials that can be dissolved in water upon stirring are said to be soluble in water. For example, when you are adding sugar or salt, they would be easily dissolved when you stir them. So they are said to be soluble substance. Materials that cannot be dissolved in water, no matter how much we stir them, they are said to be insoluble materials. Example, when you add stones and clothes in water and stir them continuously, they are not mixing completely in the water. So they are said to be insoluble materials. You have to fill this table 4.3 in your textbook. For here in the table it is given sugar and salt. Does it disappear in water? When added to water, does it disappear or it does not disappear? So when you add sugar or salt, they completely disappear in water. Means they completely mix in water. So they are said to be soluble. And when you add chalk powder or sand, they do not disappear in water. So they are said to be insoluble materials. Water plays an important role in the functioning of our body because it can dissolve a large number of substances. Do liquids also dissolve in water like solid? So you have to collect some samples of vinegar, lemon juice, mustard oil or coconut oil, kerosene or any other liquid and take a glass tumbler. Fill it up to half with water. Add few spoons of one liquid to this and stir it well. Let it stand for 5 minutes we can say. So observe whether the liquid mixes with water. We notice that some liquids get completely mixed with water. For example, when you are adding, see this table, when you are adding vinegar, lemon juice, they are completely mixing with the water. While some others like mustard oil, coconut oil, kerosene, they do not mix with water and form a separate layer when kept aside for some time. So they are said to be insoluble materials. So some liquids mix with water, they are said to be soluble, while some materials do not mix with water, they are said to be insoluble. You have to write your observations that we have written in table in your textbook. Some gases are soluble in water whereas other gases are not. For example, oxygen, we can say that water has usually small quantities of some gases dissolved in it. For example, oxygen gas that is dissolved in water is very important for the survival of animals and plants that live in water. Fourth property is float or sink. Some materials come to the surface and some settle down at the bottom. So we can say that fourth property is float or some materials sink. So materials either flow or sink in water. Light materials like paper float in water while heavy materials like metal sink in water. Example, leaves and corks can float in water while rocks, metal keys and coins sink in water. Fifth property is transparency. Those substances or materials through which it can be seen clearly are called transparent materials like glass, air, water and some plastics. We can see through them clearly. So they are called transparent materials. Shopkeepers usually prefer to keep biscuits, sweets and other eatables in transparent containers of glass or plastic so that buyers can easily see them. Objects and materials through which we can see but not clearly, they are called as translucent materials. For example, it is shown in the figure like in the translucent, we can say that butter paper or frosted glass, they are example of translucent objects. We can see through it but not clearly. So they are called translucent objects. And third is opaque object. Means objects which cannot be seen through are called opaque. We cannot see through the opaque objects. Example, metal, wood and cardboard are some example of opaque materials, and you cannot see anything from these materials, from the opaque material. So what is the need to group the objects based on some properties? So main reasons are, first reason is convenience to store. We often group objects in order to store similar objects together in order to make locating them easier, to find them easier in future. Even in our homes, we store spices together in kitchen while storing washing powders in our bathroom. And next is why we need to group the objects. Second important point is convenience to study. So we group objects so that it becomes easy for us to understand, to study their features as well as their patterns and some of their features. So thank you for listening. Now just read this chapter from textbook.